What's going on, everybody? LK here. So today we are going to ask and figure out, why do people play Shotos? So I actually did this a little bit last year. I talked about why people play grapplers, in my opinion, and why people play zoners, in my opinion. This is after years of in-depth research, scientific research on all archetypes playing many people. So let's talk about Shotos. So just like the others, we first have to start by defining what is a Shoto. Usually we define archetypes as an intersection of how the characters win games and their tools. So for zoners, we talked about zoning with normals versus zoning with projectiles. And for grapplers, we talked about their limited mobility in general for traditional grapplers, and of course, big grab, go, boom. But even though you might have an idea of what a Shoto is, so if we're looking at Guilty Gear Strive, we'd be talking about Kyle or Soul, likely. We need to make sure we define what a Shoto is because of one specific character. It's this guy. It's Kazuya Mishima from Smash Brothers. Just kidding, from Tekken. But he got added to Smash like a year ago, and people were calling him a Shoto. They go, gosh darn it, Sakurai, how could you add yet another Shoto to Smash Bros? But is Kazuya a Shoto? We don't actually know. So let's run him through the definition of a Shoto. So using Lord Infil's fighting game glossary, thankfully we have Shoto here, an archetype in the Street Fighter series for a character that has a fireball, a shoryuken, and a tatsu. Their main game plan is to play solid footsies with fireballs and pokes, and then uppercut you when you jump at them. Ryu, Ken, Akuma are all quintessential Shotos that appear in virtually every Street Fighter title, and the subtle variations in their moves make a big difference in how they play. And it's actually pretty interesting that they follow up too. Asking whether a given character is a Shoto is a common question, because we have Sagat. Sagat is usually not considered a Shoto, even though he has multiple fireballs and is more focused on zoning, right? Sakura is maybe a Shoto. She has all the tools necessary on paper, but her shoryuken is not often used for anti-air. So this is a pretty specific definition. Specific, but I agree. So the main thing I would say is that they have those three moves, right? A projectile, traveling special move, and invincible uppercut. So Soul, the main character of Guilty Gear, Soul, bad guy. Projectile, check. Traveling special move, check. So this is specifically you're lunging at them with something, right? You're thinking of the tatsu that Ryu and Ken usually have. And then last, an invincible uppercut, of course. Infil's definition was a little bit tighter, and in there they're like, oh, the uppercut has to be usable as an anti-air. You can use these as anti-airs, even if it's not common, you can. So Kyle, same thing. So Kyle's got the projectile, traveling special move, more than one, to be honest. Soul also. And of course the invincible uppercut. Now Kazuya, I would say, has 2 out of 3. I would say, even as someone who's not like super educated in Tekken, there is Electric Wind God Fist, and I think that covers 2 in 1, right? It's a traveling move and it's invincible, but there's just no projectile. Where's the projectile? Where is it? So Kazuya, not a Shoto. Other examples, of course, we could use the aforementioned Ryu, Ken, Akuma. There would also be Narukami from Persona 4 Arena. Perfect example of a Shoto. Projectile, traveling special move, invincible uppercuts, got all 3. So from here, let's talk about the reasons why people actually play these characters. Now that we know definitely what a Shoto is. So first, we have to start with aesthetics. And you might be like, aesthetics? Like these super vanilla characters, like these generic characters, who would like these characters because they think they look cool or are interesting? But there's something you forgot. This is a shonen protagonist. This is the shonen power-up. One energy of these characters is that people who pick them, they're like, oh, this is the main character. This is my boy. This is my boy. This is me. I'm the main character. I'm going to pick that guy. I think this extra applies to like licensed fighting games, because usually the protagonist of a license tends to be a Shoto. For example, you might remember this guy, Gran, from Grand Blue Fantasy. He has everything. He's got the invincible DP, traveling attack with the boot, and a fireball. Thus, a Shoto. But then for the Kens of the world, they kind of want that main character energy with a dash of cool guy. I have a story of more than one friend. I thought it was just like my one friend, but I've heard this from other people where they just want to play the cool guy with a sword. And that's usually the Shoto, right? Kai's right there. There's Jin Kisaragi from Blaze Blue. And once again, Narukami. So while it might seem generic to some people, it does attract people. Mainstream appeal is a thing. Then we must talk about the ease of the character. So here we have the two that are in this game, Sol and Kai. Kai, also known as Kyle Kisuke, is rated 5-star ease, so he's the easiest character in this game. Despite what people might tell you, there are many characters in this game that are not that hard to pick up, but out of all of them, the only one with a 5-star ease of use is Kyle. But usually just the game telling you, hey, this character is easy to pick up is not quite enough. So what makes these characters easy to play? So first off, they never make these characters crazy complex, at least not on purpose. All their tools are pretty straightforward and easy to define. So for example, Kai, so his far slash is just a poke that hits from far, and his crouching slash is a low hit that hits from far. His fireball is just something that takes up space. He has both this slide, which is an instant low. He has this to protect the air and the ground at the same time. It has a little bit of an advantage when you use a fireball first. This move is invincible. You can look at a move with him and be like, this is how you use it. There's not a lot of ambiguity or like secret uses behind his moves. Sol is like, he has the far poke, he has the plus poke, he has his kind of footsie tool, this medium, this is his crouching slash, but it's a mid, not a low, but it's fast. His whip punish button. So these characters are kind of what you see is what you get. Where there are examples of other characters who, even though the game might suggest you need to use the move a certain way, you might not necessarily be able to do that. So Baiken is a pretty good example. She has a 6P where most people would say that this move, her forward punch, is not a good anti-air, despite the game basically saying, oh, everyone's forward punch, 6P, is an anti-air. And that's because it's slow, she kind of advances in a funny type of way. So where someone else's might work as an anti-air in a spot, hers might not, but she has other ways of dealing with the situation. Either rising up to meet people, parrying the attack, or just getting out of the way. So that is an example of like, it seems the game tells you to use a move a certain way, but you might not necessarily be able to, so you have to do something else. Where with Shotos, you tend to not have to do that. If we ignore Kyle, they tend to make these characters pretty good on purpose. I mean, Launch Sol, people said he ruined the game. There's Launch Narukami, SF4 Ryu on launch. Well, we can't say totally, but there has definitely been a trend of these main characters, Shoto characters, being good. For whatever reason, honestly, either they're just the poster boy like Sol, or there was a rumor for a long time that Narukami was made to be good in Persona because he was the main character of Persona. You might be like, how do they make them good on purpose? So you'd have to look at some of the things they've nerfed on Sol over time. So they've nerfed this move, 6S, which is a new move for Strive, multiple times since the game has come out. They made it easier to counterattack against. They lowered how much block stun and hit stun it's had. They changed an entire system mechanic mostly because of this move, his far slash. There's other moves, of course, that made it so they changed the faultless defense, which is kind of like the push block of Guilty Gear Strive. But this far slash was definitely one of the reasons. They've nerfed his damage multiple times. He did a lot of damage. So despite the characters seeming to be pretty simple, they usually are like slightly overtuned in their simplicity. Then, since they're all based on the same core tools, it tends to be pretty easy to pick up. So once you learn one of these characters, Ryu, Akuma, Gran, Kyle, whatever, you can just go to another character who has those same tools and pick them up pretty quickly. They won't use everything exactly the same, especially the special moves. So special moves, they tend to be the differentiator. So Kyle uses this way more in neutral than Sol uses Gunflame for screen control, mostly just because this does not go full screen where this does. Or another example would be, you don't really see Stun Dipper that often raw unless he has 50 meter to make it safe. You do see it as like a combo tool. Whereas Sol, depending on the type of person you are, you'll see this in pressure. You might see it used in neutral a little bit. You'll see this used as well. This is pretty safe even though it's slow. So while the special move usage could be different, the core tool set is the same among the characters. These are transferable skills, right? So the better you get with one, the better you'll get at the archetype in general, and you'll be able to switch around and learn new Shotos easily. And finally, the last thing I'd say you have to look at is them being easy to pick up also makes the game accessible quickly. This is something I talked about with grapplers also. Since they don't have like a complex game plan and all the tools are pretty straightforward in usage, there's not a lot of like digging into situations to learn how to use each individual move. It means you can just start playing the game right away instead of having to front load your time into research. So I tend to pick characters that I have to front load a lot of time into building the character out. Like, what do I actually do with the character? And for me, that's fun. But for other people, that's not that fun. That takes a lot of time, a lot of losing, a lot of reviewing to build that character up that way. Where if you just learn Ryu in one game, then you could learn Narukami in another game, Hyde in another game, and just get to actually playing the game. The last thing I would want to touch on is about the skill aspect. So each archetype, they have a thing they want to do, and it feels good to do that, right? So for example, when we talked about grapplers, there's the challenge aspect of it all, right? So there's something you have to overcome. They can't move as fast. Generally, traditional grapplers are not considered strong characters. So being able to go from here, full screen, to making it here, and then getting the right read and opening your opponent up, especially with how committal the choice is, that's where like the fun comes. That's where the skill of a grappler comes from. And that's the thing they enjoy. The dopamine hit of hitting that sick command grab, knowing they're gonna block, and hitting that command grab, that's what they like. For Shotos, there's a couple of things, but it all combines into one package. And people who play Shotos think they are really beating you. Truly, truly, truly beating you. And what do I mean? So to understand this idea, we have to talk about fundamentals. So we must return to the fighting game glossary. So fundamentals here, a collection of basic skills that will help you win in virtually every fighting game. These include the ability to keep at a good range, play footsies, anti-air when the opponent jumps, react to moves with high startup, and condition the opponent so they panic before you. Good fundamentals are the bedrock of a solid player, and once you have enough practice, you can transfer these skills between games even if the systems are very different. So we touched upon a couple of these things too, but even in this definition of fundamentals, I think is a pretty good one. It still is kind of vague. Like, what is a good range? What are footsies? I define it as being strong in each phase of the game. So I defined this in another video, but this would be neutral, offense, defense, and knockdown. So neutral is when neither character are directly attacking each other and they're just kind of fighting for space here. Offense would be specifically block string offense. So you caught them and they're blocking and you're kind of just going in, trying to open them up, doing whatever it takes. Defense is the opposite, where you are blocking your opponent's block string and you're like, what do? I do not want to block. And then knockdown is how both you treat your knockdown when you knock the opponent down and what you do against the opponent's knockdown. This for me is the most like top level definition of fundamentals, but typically though, because there's no real solid definition of fundamentals, people don't have that much to fall back on when they're like, oh, this guy has good fundamentals, but this guy doesn't have good fundamentals. Think about things like the various Daigo moments between like the Daigo parry or him walking up and doing DP, meaty DP like 5 times in a row or something. Because there's no super solid definition of fundamentals, it becomes kind of like a mystical, magical thing. Like, this person just happens to have good fundamentals. What it translates to is, for some Shoto players, they think they're beating you at the real game. No cheap 2-on-1 setups with a doll, no coin flips, no cheap 50-50s, just all true skill, beating you in neutral, reading you directly. So going for the strike throw. Strike throw is a hard way to win, I will say, because you have to know what the opponent is doing. It's the same challenge as the grappler. Shoto characters tend to have the same type of thing. When you say how do they beat you, they beat you by either beating you in neutral in the mid-range or catching you, and generally they're strike throw characters, which means they have to attack you and know when you're not going to counterattack and then try to throw you, and that's where all the threat comes. No auto zoning, no items, no 50-50s. The person who plays a Shoto thinks they're more skilled. They're better. They're just better. How do they beat you? They beat you by controlling space, catching you, and getting you to flinch. So they feel like their fundamentals are good. They feel like their skills are being transferred through the character to beat you. And that's where that big dope, that's where that cash out comes from, and that's what keeps them coming back. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. That's why I think people play Shotos for real. Again, years of research went into this video. As usual, if you guys have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.